Hi everyone, I'm Samantha Lichttenegger and I'm the Minnesota State Executive here at Generation Connections, and today I get the pleasure of showing you all how to make the perfect cup of tea and give you all a brief overview of the history of tea. And so all of my sources come from the Coffee Tea Warehouse, Spruce Eats, and then the UK Tea and Infusion Association. So to begin with, I have here my Irish breakfast tea. It's from Twinings, and just quick check the directions on the back of it. They usually say how long you should steep your tea for, and so I have mine for about 4 to 5 minutes. So open it up, and we're just gonna gently set that in there, and then I have an electric kettle. I have some pre-boiled water, so turn that on, and then you're just gonna gently pour it all in. Perfect. Pour your hot water in. You always want to make sure it's not boiling, that way you don't burn the tea. So electric kettle, just flip it on, let it sit there, boil, and then take it off, and then just let it sit there for about 30 seconds to cool down a little bit. And then you're going to want to set your timer. Just going on, so that way you don't burn the tea, because if you let it sit too long, it tends to it's called stewed, it tastes a little off, and then you don't want to use boiling water because you can burn your tea leaves, and so that will also give it kind of a burnt flavor, and it's less than desirable. But to begin with, tea was actually supposedly founded in 2732 BC by a Chinese emperor by the name of Shen Yung. And it was said that he was sitting in his garden and he had this pot of boiling water, and these leaves fell into it, and he drank it. And he was so overcome by the warmth that just flooded him when he drank it that he named the beverage cha, and was written using the Chinese character to investigate, because he felt as if the warmth was just investigating his body. And so then we see in 200 BC, a Han Dynasty emperor would then rule that the new character for tea would be written with wooden branches, grass, and a man in the middle, and it was entirely to symbolize that balance between mankind and nature. But the character was still said as cha. And so the Chinese were very strict in how they cultivated tea. And so just a little fun fact is, if you were to be the one to pick the tea leaves, you can't eat garlic, onions, or spices so as not to contaminate the tea and leave it for when you go to boil it later to make your tea. And so then that kind of moves us kind of into the 19th century with Japanese Buddhist monks visiting China and drinking tea. This would lead to the monks then bringing the tea seeds back with them to plant the trees back in their monasteries. And so that would be where tea gets its origins, for Japan at least, in the monasteries. They would drink it as a way of staying awake when they were meditating. So that kind of leads to its value and importance seen in Japanese culture, to where we now see tea being served with almost every meal in Japan today. So then we have in 1618, the Chinese would gift the Tsar Alexis of Russia tea, and he would share it with his court, and it became such a popular drink that they actually started a camel caravan for it. So we see 6,000 camels leave from Russia to China to back, which would take them about a year and a half to go that 11,000 miles to bring tea. And then we see the creation of the Trans-Siberian Railway, which would get rid of the camel caravan and do it in just a little over a week. And so then around that same time, the Portuguese and the Dutch found tea. So they were the first to import tea into Europe. And that'd be super important because in 1662, Charles II would marry Catherine of Braganza. So she was a Portuguese princess, and as part of her dowry would bring tea over to England. And so she introduced it to the court over in England. And that's where England first learns about tea, and it becomes so popular. But only among the royalty and the aristocracy, because tea was imported and therefore a luxury. It would cost an average worker a month of their wages to actually be able to afford tea. But then we see in 1717, Thomas Twining would open the first tea shop in England. And that kind of led to this sprouting of tea shops all across England for people. So it became a little bit more commonplace. And so then we see the American Revolution. So with the coming of Europe drinking tea and them coming over to Americas, we were originally actually as Americans tea drinkers. But with the American Revolution and the taxes on tea, it was seen as patriotic to boycott tea. So that's why we see the Boston Tea Party with the dumping of all the tea into the ocean. And so that's why we're coffee drinkers, is because you boycotted tea to show your patriotism and you drank coffee as a substitute. So then we also see Americans were the inventors of iced tea. In 1904 at the St. Louis World Trade Fair, it was a really hot day. So those that were supplying tea, people were turned off by it being a hot beverage, and so they poured it over ice and created iced tea, and that's why we have iced tea today. 1908 saw the emergence of the tea bag. So a New York tea merchant had put his tea in little bags to be distributed, but restaurants would just steep their tea in the bags. They wouldn't do the loose leaf. So that led to the emergence of the tea bag, and that's why Americans use tea bags, but that's not something we see in England. It's actually considered uncultured to use a tea bag in England. So that kind of is where we are today, and so that's why we're slowly emerging as more tea drinkers and such. But now that it's been about 5 minutes, I like my tea a little stronger, so I steep it a little bit longer. And then I just come up with my little cup, and it goes off to the side, and I leave you all with one fun fact. We originally would pour the milk in first to our tea, because that way it would stop the china from breaking. But now it's the huge debate of, do you pour your milk first or do you pour your milk second when you make tea? But one thing they do to say is that milk second will alter the taste of your tea, but I actually like it that way, so I pour my milk in second, so I don't do it the proper way, but that is just a fun thing. So are you a milk first or are you a milk second type person? Thank you so much.